Jeff Lang, welcome to Beyond Stage Fright. Now, you're Associate Principal Horn of the Philadelphia Orchestra in the United States. You're on the faculty of the Curtis Institute, Bard College and Temple University, and you perform regularly as a soloist and chamber musician and give masterclasses both nationally and internationally. The first question I want to ask you is, how do you manage the pressures that come along with being Associate Principal Horn in one of the big 5 American orchestras?
Well, I can say a few things. I started off a long time ago after school. I went to Israel and started my career after 2 years from graduation as principal horn of the Israel Philharmonic. And in those days, I was young and very inexperienced, but was thrown into a situation where we had very big concerts with great conductors, all the top conductors, top soloists, touring, recording, right away early on with Zubin Mehta and Leonard Bernstein quite a bit. So I feel like one advantage I had at the very beginning of my career was having such an experience kind of right out of school and being kind of thrown into the fire in this high-profile job. And the support at that time of the orchestra that I was playing in, the Israel Philharmonic, was great. It was an orchestra that was very easy to play in. The relationships with my colleagues and friends were wonderful with the conductors. It's not always that way with orchestra musicians. Sometimes their first job is an incredibly difficult, stressful job. But in my situation, it was a high-profile orchestra combined with fabulous colleagues and very should I say, understanding conductors. And I was very fortunate to have some very big experiences early on that went well without some of the added pressures that maybe a job like that, you would assume that a job like that, and I would attribute that to just the quality and the work ethic and the relations I had with the people in the orchestra. When you can be on stage and are comfortable in your surroundings, comfortable with your colleagues, comfortable with the conductor, if you know that you have the conductor's support, encouragement, that seems to me the number one thing that relieves performance stress. If you know that if you have a mistake, if you make a mistake here or there, if you're forgiven, and you move on to the next passage, and you move on to the next passage, if it's more of a focus on the quality of the playing rather than the occasional thing that might go wrong, it takes a lot of pressure off. A lot of colleagues of mine maybe haven't had that experience when they were young, and I think when you're young that makes an impression that kind of carries on the rest of your career. The other thing I would say is it's important for musicians to understand and to learn that it's okay to make a mistake. Most performance anxiety, I would say all performing anxiety just comes from overlying fear, which is connected. We can go deeper into these things, but it's connected to your ego and fear, and these kind of things, ego and fear, are kind of anti-creative in the creative process. They kind of they diminish what you can do on stage at the moment when you're performing. And if you can get yourself in the overall picture to allow yourself to maybe not have a great day, allow yourself to occasionally not play your best, then I find the overall result is you end up playing a lot better. You end up playing your best when you can, forgive yourself for little mistakes here and there.
Can you just tell me a little bit more about what you mean about ego and anxiety and fear being connected?
In a high-profile orchestra, when you have become a famous player or soloist, and every night someone's coming out to hear, pick any soloist, any big soloist, they're expecting to hear this product. When there's this pressure to be that all the time, that's kind of where the ego comes in, because I'm so and so. I have to be great because I am so and so. And people are coming to hear me, and I must be great, and I have to keep my reputation. If I have a bad night, people will think, oh, he's losing it, or oh, she's slipping, or oh, she's not as good as everyone says she is. That's or he's getting older, or I heard him 20 years ago and he was much better 20 years ago. All these kind of things really bombard great players, and it is a big stress. Some people come every night in the orchestra to hear, the principal player of any instrument, and they feel like they have to bring it every night. It is nice to admit that sometimes you don't have your best night. And maybe you're playing, as you get older, maybe your playing does diminish. That's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, my experience of talking to horn players, especially in the UK, is that they don't necessarily feel they can make mistakes. So it's very interesting hearing what you have to say about that.
Sometimes the horn players have very exposed entrances that could be high, that no conductor wants to have the horn player crack the notes. And that's the first thing from when you pick up the horn when you're a little kid in school, you're missing notes all over the place. And from the first day you play the horn to the last day you play the horn, it's kind of in the back of your mind, am I going to miss that note? The greatest horn players in the world all cracked notes. When you get a bad reaction, or suddenly you get, some kind of, unwelcoming reaction from the conductor, that immediately makes the horn player a little anxious and uptight. If this starts to snowball, if this starts to become a recurrent problem, horn players get uptight and they miss more notes. If you can free yourself from that, if a horn player can really free yourself from the fear of missing those notes, then you can play with much more focus onto the music, and to being an artist, and being a creative artist, worrying and not worrying about just merely missing a note.
Are there any differences for you between playing solo, being a chamber musician, and being an orchestral horn player?
Yeah, there are several differences. When you're a soloist, you are, of course, the big event. You're the feature. Yeah, You're the main event. You can play with much more expression, much more artistic creativity, much more individualism, personality, than you normally would in an orchestra. When you play in an orchestra, of course, you have to blend, and you have to balance, and you have to play in tune with your colleagues. And even if you're a principal horn player, um, a lot of your work is playing in sort of a chamber music setting, with playing with your other principal winds of the orchestra, with the balancing the brass, and balancing this balance between the winds, playing with the wind soloist, playing with the brass soloist. In an orchestra, you kind of take on two roles of your horn player. You play in the wind choir, you play in the brass choir. So a lot of orchestral playing is fitting in, except for those moments when everything stops and the horn player has a great solo cadenza or something, and then the spotlight's on you. Most of the time in the orchestra, spotlight is not on you, even though a lot of horn players would like to think it is, but it's not. You want to show a lot of personality, a lot of artistry, individualism in your own playing, your own voice, but you also are working as a team, and you're collaborating with other musicians, and you can't be, there's a time to step out and there's a time to step back. It's a little more well defined in chamber music than it is in playing in the orchestra. So the three of them are very, very different. And one thing I might add to your question is, one other dimension of that is some studio playing. I've played a fair amount in a recording studio, and that is actually kind of a fourth way of playing that does not relate to the previous three. When you're playing in a recording studio, you're playing in an atmosphere with lots of times you're playing with click track, sometimes you're playing with musicians that are not there. So you're really surgically inserting sometimes a horn part into tracks that have been recorded maybe all over the world, and it's a very different style of playing. Still, it has to sound like a live musician, but it also has to fit in the framework, and that's a very different type of playing that I've liked to do over the years too.
The real question that I'm
Yeah.
fascinated by
Yeah.
is whether you feel that there is any difference between the way the American orchestras work and the way American orchestras and American orchestral musicians talk about or deal with
Mhm.
stage fright and performance anxiety compared to British and European orchestras. I don't know whether you have any views on that, but certainly from my perspective, it's very hard to get British musicians to talk about this topic.
I have played in European orchestras. I went on tour one time with the Bavarian Radio Orchestra, and I noticed immediately that the wind and brass playing was very different from in America. Each individual player was playing, I should say, much more soloistic and much more individually. I'm making very big generalizations here, but lots of times in American orchestras, we're told from early training to constantly blend and balance, and blend and balance. Don't stick out, blend and balance. But I noticed in the European orchestra, the individual, there was a little more personality, individuality from the playing. Now, obviously, this means that the players were playing with a great deal of confidence. So I didn't really feel that when I was playing the Bavarian Radio Orchestra that there was a nervous feeling on stage. I didn't feel like any of those players, at least, were playing as if they were nervous or somehow contained or confined by any of the problems of stage fright. They may have been, but it was a very outward way of playing. But specifically to the stage fright issue, American orchestras. People are generally very open about this issue, and realize that there are some players. Some of my colleagues do use beta blockers. Some of my colleagues do not. Some use them only for auditions. Some use them for performance. And it's not a shame or a secret. I know many teachers in American conservatories are recommending students that have problems with nerves, and I should clarify that it's not for every student, but some students that maybe have problems with nerves. There's not such a taboo here on taking any of these any beta blockers. It's not really seen as a performance enhancing kind of drug. For me, the times that I've tried Enderol or any kind of beta blocker, it sort of dulls the experience a little bit, and I didn't really find that it made the difference between playing great or playing not so great. We're in a very competitive environment in auditions and in the big competitions, where a lot of the people playing in these big competitions or playing in the big auditions will be taking something, and if you don't, you might be putting yourself at a disadvantage.
Is it normal to discuss your nerves with your colleagues, for example, before you go on stage with the orchestra?
It's not normal. It is not normal. And occasionally, it's very rare, and this is a very specific thing. Occasionally, if you have a colleague who is also a close friend and has maybe is having trouble, or maybe hasn't had such a good night, and you're aware that the person is maybe having a problem, or maybe not having the best day. Occasionally, someone would say after the concert, I just got nervous tonight. I don't know what happened. I just got nervous tonight, and it's very rare, and it doesn't. With my experience, this is true with auditions too. It doesn't necessarily relate to having a very high pressure performance. Um, sometimes sometimes the highest pressure performances are the ones that you can sail through and enjoy every moment. If you're on, on tour and recording and the camera's rolling and you're on live TV in Japan or something like that, sometimes those performances with me are the ones that have actually been the easiest. And then there are other times when you might be playing a solo with a community band and suddenly get nervous. And so I think there is no, I'm just based on my experience that there's really no formula.
So, how do you prepare for a performance, both in advance and just before you go on stage?
Most of the repertoire that I play is repertoire that I have played many times. And that's kind of music that's in my bones and my soul, and I know these pieces. It would be rarely I would have to really work, practice diligent, practice hard, learn the part. Of course, playing in shape, keeping your playing in good shape is an entirely different thing. But actually preparing for the music at hand, when you know it so well, comes very easy. Day by day we play so many concerts. Usually you're rushing to put your tuxedo on. We just played a concert last night down in Baltimore, and we took a train. The Philadelphia Orchestra, we have our own train, and we took the train down to Baltimore. You run in, you change, you do your sound check, grab something to eat, and then you go on stage, and that's just part of the job. There's no there's no big ritual, before that. A few times I just had to jump out there and just play, and those are sometimes the best times because there's no time to think about. You don't have time or no time to think about getting nervous.
How do you keep your focus on stage?
Sometimes your mind does wander a little bit. You have to you have to remember where you are. You have to remember that there's maybe 3,000 people looking at me about to play this horn solo. Occasionally, you have to kind of like bring it in like that. They're such high quality players. The level of playing is so high that I feel that always I have to keep up, and I just have to keep up because everyone is keeping up such a very high level, and our maestro Yannick is the same way. He's every night he doesn't he doesn't slack off. He doesn't lose his focus or concentration, and it's always inspiring. And it's always there. It's always 100%. So when you're playing with people that are giving 100%, it's sort of easy to do that.
Have you ever had any real performing disasters, or what you might feel are performing disasters, and how would you manage them if they arise?
That's a good question. I actually am lucky to say that I have not had any bad performing disasters. And I don't say that from a standpoint that, I'm a great horn player, I'm a consistent horn player, and I never make mistakes. No, but I can honestly say of the times that I've gone out and have been a soloist, I've been a soloist several times, I've never had any really bad issues when then the playing has broken down or emotionally things have broken down. I mean, there have been times in my career when I've been under quite a lot of pressure, quite a lot of stress and pressure under high-level performances, and maybe at times with my health maybe wasn't really what it should be. I've had recently on tour some health problems and had to play some very high-profile concerts when I wasn't feeling very well. And a few of these I would put them in the category of not performances that were a disaster, and not by far, but I've had some actually very incredibly difficult performances when, I just couldn't wait for the last note to end because I wasn't feeling well. And in my 30 years of playing in the orchestra with great soloists and with great musicians around me, I can only count one or two times that there's been a complete breakdown in a performance. It's very, very rare. So, and the times that things are not 100%, you can always forgive yourself. And if the worst happens, it's never so bad.
What are the biggest stresses that you have to deal with in your performing life?
I try in life in general to not be a to not be a stressed person. In general, because I think if you have stress outside of your life, and then sometimes you bring it on stage, and vice versa. If you're a very uptight player and are worried about the next entrance and are very nervous and are not having a good time, and many musicians may look fantastic and sound fantastic, but are actually not having fun. So I've always tried to have fun when I play, and I think that I think that's really an important thing which I try to instill on my students is to never lose the joy and the original reasons why you play the instrument. But I always try to remind myself, why am I doing this? Why did I do when I was a kid? Why did I love playing in the band? I try to remind myself that I still love music and I love to play my instrument, and it's something that is more of and music should maybe not cause stress, but alleviate stress. It can be your oasis, it can be your it can be your island, your place to go. Sometimes when you go through that kind of life changing event, whether it be a personal or a health thing or something, it puts everything else into perspective. Where suddenly going out on stage is something that you love and that is a joy.
And what does it feel like when everything's really going well on stage?
It feels great. It feels great, and it feels very easy. It feels like you're not working hard. And one great message for all musicians and students, if you can get to the place where you can perform and not seem like you're working hard, and not of course you're putting a great deal of effort into what you're doing, but there are those times when everything is working very well, that everything seems very easy, and that's for me very very rewarding. And of course, if you love music, if music is in your soul, and there's nothing more gratifying and inspiring to be on stage and performing, collectively with your friends and great musicians, and all kind of reaching the same artistic goal, and really getting that is incredibly rewarding. And when you can get to that, when you have those performances that are also free of any kind of anxiety or stress, that's really like that's why this is what we do.
Jeff Lang, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Sure, thank you very much.